All right, Brian, let's talk Naeem Offord here. He is still five-star defensive back committed to Ohio State. There have been rumblings for a while, and of course, verbal commitments, and this applies to the Oregon kids as well. It's more about an undisputed leader at this point in the cycle because we're still in early June. These kids are going to keep getting texts. They're going to keep getting calls. They're going to take visits. They're going to talk to coaches. They're going to do all sorts of stuff as time goes on. So you can never truly rule anybody out when you're looking at a recruitment at this stage because no one signed their national letter of intent just yet. But Naeem Offord verbally committed to Ohio State. That's now a Big Ten rival for Oregon because everything makes sense in today's world. But this is a kid that you're very familiar with. What is the latest on where he stands with the Buckeyes?
It's very odd. On Friday, I found out that he was taking an official visit to Auburn. It was kind of out of the blue. Auburn was one of the schools that many people thought had a shot at him before he committed to the Buckeyes in the first place. For reference, Auburn's about 2 hours and 10 minutes from the downtown area where he lives in Birmingham. So it's not exactly hard to get there, but he changed from making the decision to take an OV to Auburn in the season to doing it now. So whatever, but he had a great visit. Auburn folks think they got a legit shot now. I didn't think there was any chance he was going to flip from Ohio State at one point, but now he's at least he took the unofficial to Oregon. Then he took the official to Auburn. So I'm starting to think it's a little more open than I originally anticipated. Maybe I misguessed on this a little bit or whatever, but he just seems different now. I don't know if he just committed too early. That's a possibility. But Oregon is supposed to get an OV in the fall, and so are some other schools. Like Florida might get one. Bama might get one. This is an interesting race all of a sudden.
Yeah, and as we mentioned earlier in the show, the bulk of Oregon's 2025 class will be made up this summer. We'll be talking about it plenty here on the show, but there are still going to be those guys like Aiden Breland in last year's class, for instance, committed the day of the Washington game when Oregon was in Seattle. He committed just like a couple hours before the game. It sounds like Offord is going to be that sort of guy where you're following that timeline throughout the course of the season and into the season as games get played. Is that kind of your sense that there's not really an opportunity for him to shut it down before the season starts?
I mean, he could, but these schools are going to recruit him through. And he's mentioned that he had originally planned to take the OV to Auburn during the season. I assume he's going to take at least one during the season. His high school coach is a great guy. He'll find a way to make that work, and Offord is best player in the state of Alabama. I don't think it's all that debatable. So they're going to let him take an OV and kind of like, miss film after a game or whatever. It's not going to matter much. I don't think he's going to shut it down in the summer. I'll be very surprised. I think it's going in the other direction. It's getting broader instead of less. So I could be wrong, but I mean, he's taken 2 trips that I didn't expect him to in the last few weeks.
Another name that Oregon fans should be aware of that I have not talked about before here on the show is linebacker Noah McHale from out in California. Max Torres over at Scoop Duck logged a prediction for Oregon to land him in the 2025 class. He's from Laverne, California, which is not the most well-known part of the state necessarily, but you don't get a blue chip rating being from that area by accident. I think of a guy like Keith Brown from a couple cycles ago that was from Lebanon, Oregon. And when other schools were recruiting Keith Brown, who's now up at Washington State, I bet you they look at Lebanon, Oregon and go, where on earth is... I don't even know if I could point out Lebanon on a map if you just gave me the state of Oregon. It's one of the more remote spots. But that's kind of the sense I get, is that he is the sort of player that is incredibly talented, to be sure, but feels a little bit like a big fish in a smaller pond.
Well, he lives east of LA, and I mean, it's just out in the burbs. He's one of those kids, though, when you watch him play, I've seen him at 7-on-7 tournaments multiple times. Even as a linebacker, most 7-on teams will use a safety at the linebacker spot because it's all passing. He's really good at it. There's a reason that Southern Cal, Oregon, and Texas A&M are after him. He's legit. And he told me a while back those were probably going to be his final 3, and he just announced those were. I think he's a great football player, and I wouldn't care if he was from a 1A school, and he's not. But he's just a guy that understands the game, and he makes really, really good plays on the football in the passing game. And the high school film shows him as a thumper, too. So this is an impact guy. He's played against good comp in California. I don't think he's going to have a problem making the transition. So, yeah, if he ends up at Oregon, they're going to get a heck of a football player.
Did he announce a commitment date when he announced his final three, or is that still to be decided?
I did not see that if he did.
Okay, gotcha. We'll keep rolling through the names because, as I said, we got a lot of names to get to here, and we're going back to the defensive backfield. This also a name that I've not discussed before here on the show. Kainoa Winston is someone that Oregon's after. The other finalists, according to 24/7, are Michigan, North Carolina, and Penn State. Don't see North Carolina in the mix for a lot of players that Oregon, Michigan, and Penn State would be after. Those tend to be more heavy hitters in recruiting. But what can you tell us about Oregon's pursuit of him?
They're going up against Penn State, in my opinion, more than anybody else because his brother is the safety there. And his brother might be the best defensive player on what was the best defensive unit in the country last year. So that's hard to overcome. But for whatever reason, the kids in Maryland like Oregon. That is so random. But yeah, I don't know what that is either. They always have kids visiting from that area. Anyway, he plays at Gonzaga, really, really good program. And he's a kid that could play corner or safety, doesn't even matter. His film is really good. Instinctive, has great speed. I think this is a guy that can make an impact at a lot of schools in year one in some capacity, not just talking special teams either. So Michigan, Penn State are probably going to be the ones that talked about the most. The North Carolina thing is a bit odd, but North Carolina for DC area people, that school has just always recruited that in every sport. So that's the connection. I'll be shocked if he signs there, though. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I think Mac Brown's on his last leg.
That's how I feel as well.
North Carolina has a lot of pull in Virginia and DC. So that's just what that is, but they're not very good. So whatever. Drake May is no longer there, folks. I think he'll end up at one of the other schools. Penn State's my pick. But as always, Oregon is the outlier because you never know what's going to happen when a kid takes an OV to Oregon. It's random. I hate picking on Oregon kids.
I have a thought. Just a thought.
Oh boy.
Perhaps the Maryland to Oregon connection is just the direct appeal of going all the way across the country. Like if you want to go to the other coast, like you grow up in Maryland, which is, I'm testing my geography knowledge here, borders the Atlantic Ocean. Yes.
Yes.
Maybe you want to go somewhere that borders the Pacific Ocean, in which case you would then look at Washington, Oregon, and California as states, and you'd say, well, who's the biggest recruiting power out there? And though USC is seemingly making an effort, as you and I are talking about in today's episode of Locked On College Football, which you guys should go check out if you're interested, USC is definitely trying to up the ante on their recruiting a little bit, but Oregon is the premier recruiting team out west. So maybe that's the draw. I don't know. That was just random thought that kind of pops in my head. Like maybe they just think, I want to try out the other coast. Just like complete, not Utah, not Arizona. No, I want to get all the way to the coast and Oregon is the team. Or alternatively, perhaps more plausibly, Oregon just has a very in-depth recruiting staff and they do a good job of covering their bases.
Maybe it's both. Sometimes kids want to get away from home. There are kids like that. Especially some of the inner city kids. Like sometimes they just want to go as far away as they can get from Miami or Detroit or New Orleans, whatever. You see that. So it's possible. DC's got a lot of kids that leave. So maybe that's what it is.
Maybe it is. You never know. Because there are just so many things that go into a recruitment, contrary to what angry YouTube commenters might think. Oregon does not just recruit well because they have NIL dollars, though certainly it doesn't hurt, but that's not not the only thing that plays into it. This episode is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off, which is a lot better than prices going up. They have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time uses all that to take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. You can save up to 60% buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you're looking for. And they've got all-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. That might be the best thing they do of all the great things that they do. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.